The town of Oakhaven was a place where time felt like it was trapped in amber. It was a coastal village where the Atlantic pounded against the cliffs, and every child grew up with the taste of salt on their lips. This is where Mark and Alice began. They met over a conflict of property. Mark, a quiet boy with perpetually messy dark hair, had found a particularly smooth piece of driftwood. Alice, a girl with eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea and a stubborn chin, decided it was the perfect mast for her sandcastle. Instead of fighting, they spent the next 4 hours building a fortress together. By the time the tide came in to reclaim their work, they weren't strangers anymore. They were a team. Their childhood was a montage of shared secrets. There was the old oak in the woods behind Alice's house where they carved their initials, not because they knew what romance was, but because they couldn't imagine a future where they weren't side by side. Mark was the anchor, steady, thoughtful, and grounded. Alice was the kite, full of wild ideas and a desire to see what was over the horizon. They made a pact when they were 10. No matter where they went, they would always come back to the cliffs on the first day of summer. It was a simple promise, made with pinky swears and sticky fingers from ice cream, unaware of how heavy such promises become when you grow up. Part 2. The Fractures of Growth, ages 13 to 18. Adolescence is a storm that rewires the soul. For Mark and Alice, it was the era of awkwardness and the terrifying transition from friend to something more. The shift happened on a Tuesday in October. They were 16. The air was crisp, and they were sitting on the roof of Mark's garage, looking at a sky filled with more stars than should be legally allowed. Alice was talking about her dream of studying architecture in the city, 400 miles away. "You'll forget about this place," Mark had said, his voice cracking slightly. "You'll forget about me." Alice didn't answer with words. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, the touch felt electric. It wasn't the comfortable lean of a childhood friend. It was the desperate cling of someone who realized that the person sitting next to them was their home. That night, under the indifferent stars, they had their first kiss, tasting of peppermint and fear. But with love came the realization of sacrifice. To stay together meant one of them had to hold the other back, or they both had to endure the agony of distance. The night before Alice left for university, they sat on their rusty swings. The metal groaned under their weight. "We're going to be the ones who make it," Alice whispered, her eyes wet. "We have to," Mark replied. "There is no version of my life where you aren't there." Part 3. The Long Silence. The University Years. The long-distance phase was a slow erosion. The first year was fueled by adrenaline and 5-hour Skype calls. They sent care packages filled with local Oakhaven snacks in hoodies that smelled like their respective laundry detergents. But by the second year, the new world began to pull at them. Alice was surrounded by ambitious architects and late-night gallery openings. Mark was deep into mechanical engineering, spending his nights covered in grease in a local workshop, trying to keep his father's business afloat after his dad fell ill. The resentment started as small weeds. "Why didn't you call?" "I was busy working, Alice. I don't have the luxury of sitting in cafes all day." "That's not fair, Mark. I'm working hard too." Nadim F. Zem, 11/01/2026, 1916. They broke up twice, once for a week and once for 3 months. During those 3 months, the silence was deafening. Mark tried dating a girl from his town, but every time she laughed, he found himself mourning the specific way Alice's nose crinkled when she found something truly funny. Alice went on dates in the city, but no one understood her references to the Great Storm of '05 or the way she liked her tea, with too much honey and a pinch of salt. They reconnected on a cold February night. Mark called her, his voice trembling. I don't care if we're in different time zones or different worlds. I'd rather be miserable waiting for you than happy with anyone else. They learned then that effort is the currency of love. They stopped counting who called whom more. They started a shared digital calendar. They worked extra shifts to afford train tickets. They stopped trying to fix each other's problems and started just listening. Part 4. The Collision of Reality. The Mid-20s. The happily ever after was supposed to start when Alice moved back after graduation. They found a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. It always smelled like burnt flour and yeast. This was the hardest part. In a long-distance relationship, you only see the best version of the other person. Now they saw the real version. Mark was messy. He left his tools on the kitchen table and snored when he was tired. Alice was a perfectionist. She would stay up until 4 a.m. obsessing over a blueprint, becoming irritable and cold if she was interrupted. They had a massive fight over a leaky faucet 6 months in. It wasn't about the faucet, it was about the exhaustion of 5 years of trying. Maybe we're just two different people now, Alice had shouted, throwing a dish towel. We're clinging to who we were at 10 years old. Mark stood his ground. I'm not clinging to a 10-year-old. I'm looking at the woman who survived the city and came back to me. I'm choosing this version of you, the tired, grumpy, architectural genius version. Why can't you choose the messy mechanic version of me? That night, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. They sat on the floor and talked until the sun came up. They realized that a relationship isn't a trophy you win. It's a garden you have to weed every single day. They started relationship check-ins, a Saturday morning coffee where they asked, "What did I do this week that made you feel unloved? And what can I do better?" Part 5. The Golden Hour. The Present. It is 30 years since the day of the Driftwood Castle. Mark and Alice still live near the coast, though in a house Alice designed herself, a beautiful blend of glass and reclaimed wood. Mark runs a high-end restoration shop for vintage boats. They are sitting on their porch. The ocean is still there, eternal and indifferent. "Do you remember the swings?" Alice asks, leaning her head on his shoulder. Her hair is streaked with silver now, but her eyes are still the color of the storm. "I remember the rust," Mark smiles, his hand finding hers. His grip is calloused, but incredibly gentle. "And I remember thinking that if I let go of your hand, I had flown away." They didn't stay together because of luck. They stayed together because they were willing to be bored together, to be poor together, to grieve together, and to grow in different directions without letting go of the rope. The kite had found its anchor, and the anchor had learned how to fly. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, they don't need to say anything. The 30 years of effort speak for themselves. Their love isn't a storybook anymore. It's a monument.
Ho, ho, ho! Every day is a holiday with